Welcome back to Foiling Week 2022 and the Foiling Week Forum. This is one of our last forums. We have like maybe one or two that are going to be dropped today, and then there are a couple tomorrow, but just a few. We're nearing the end of Foiling Week, but there's still a ton going on out on the water. We have foiling classes racing, several demonstrations going on with all sorts of new product, and that's what we're here to talk about. We're talking about next generation foiling and next generation foiling pathways, but there are the only pathways right now are from the people who originally created foiling craft that are easy to use. So not just experimental, very expensive stuff, but production equipment that has really allowed the world to experience foiling on all different levels, from all different demographics, all physical abilities, and socioeconomic places as well. You know, we have to talk about price in this conversation. And so we're going to find out about the boats that are being developed for getting in foiling. And then we're also going to be talking about training and the end users, you know, the type of people that are using these products. And then eventually, what can we do to make foiling even more accessible? Because we know it really opens up our minds and our spirits. So without further ado, on my left, we have Hattie Rogers from the University of Southampton, who's part of our Sumoth Challenge. Welcome, Hattie, here in Lake Garda. And then in our audience, we have Rowan Guide from Manta 5, which is a cycling foiling company, e-foiling company as well. Hi, Rowan.
Hi, Chris.
And then directly in front of me, I have Olympic silver medalist Luka Devotee, really famous for his boat building. And, you know, with one of our other guests, he has a lot of connections as well, but also for his sailing. But Luka is behind a really awesome project with the FD Switch, which is, it's like a moth, but we don't want to throw it into the same boat. It's a really great part of the market, and we'll hear about that. Welcome, Luka.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And on our screen, we have Perla Tanzi, who what we commonly refer to her as the Flying Hawaiian, because she's of a generation kind of like Hattie, who at a very early age, boats like the UFO and the Wasp and a couple other boats came out just when she was getting really stoked about sailing, junior sailing. She was lucky enough to have access to those. So where are you right now, Pearl?
I am in Maine right now. But yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Awesome. And then we have Dave Clark, the founder of UFO, the foiling boat that we did a boat tour of yesterday, and kind of the OG of beach boat foiling. So welcome, Dave.
Good to be here. It is. I'm actually only 5 hours south of Pearl, so we're in the morning session for us on the East Coast of the United States. It's always a good question, Chris. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, we just had our pasta and beer, so we're a little ahead of you.
Ooh.
I know. Great. All right, so let's get started on this. We're going to go through the craft first, and it's really fascinating to me that, you know, the person with the UFO that was demonstrating the UFO for us yesterday kind of corrected me. I said, "Oh yeah, it's a couple-year-old design," and she's like, "It's a more couple-year-old design. Still serves a lot of value." So let's talk about the why these craft created, and we'll go through each one. Dave, let's talk about the UFO. What was the market like when you created it?
Well, for what it's worth, the UFO was started in development. I started it in the end of 2015. So it's going on a 7-year-old concept. But bear in mind also the execution of that. One of the benefits of vertical integration, I own and operate the facility 15 minutes from here. We're in a 17,000 square foot factory with 2 production lines in it. It's the UFO and the rocket. We're continuously improving the way we do and build UFOs. And even like some things will be more noticeable. Our crank system has changed entirely. Our rigging has got better, things like that. So like, while it's, you know, you can call it an old design, only if you're either, you know, basically locking down the specifications permanently so that you don't have to think about it, or you're offshoring it. So you have to basically leave it unchanged because you can't be hands-on and manage and basically lead change. Only then does an old design meet an old execution.
Okay,
I got you.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify that. So I don't want to go putting words in anybody else's mouths, but I'll tell you the genesis of the UFO for me was that I lived a really privileged youth sailing life. Sort of on the periphery, more in the design, build, development of it. I grew up as like a crash test dummy, basically for Vanguard sailboats, and we did a C-class campaign. C-class catamarans have gone kind of dormant now, but to the America's Cup, we say you're welcome. Because we'd been developing the wing technology since 1968. And in fact, my grandfather commissioned the first working wing sail on a catamaran in 1968. So I grew up inside, wing development stuff, some foil development. It was really early on in that. And also I was racing skiffs as a kid. And then, I started competing at an international level in the international canoe. I started, I've been to 5 world championships now. And my experience got worse and worse as I got deeper and deeper into the high end of the sport because I had no friends. And part of that's my personality. But part of that is the way that sailing doesn't do as good a job as it could and can continue to improve on building the base of skills development and building the base of technological involvement as the sport advances. Like, we end up advancing out into a wilderness. It's a really alienating experience getting really good at sailing because the people that you sailed with as a kid stop. They stop for economic reasons. They stop for, various physical reasons, like I'm the wrong weight for it. Like, I left the Optimus dinghy class sooner than I would have. And this predates the Open Big. So there was not another option, which was being culturally developed to be significantly more inclusive. Like, I was a big kid. I basically aged out of the Opti at 12 and moved to skiffs, which was a function primarily. So this is Vectors, which is a competitor to the 29er. This is primarily a function of having a dad who was in the industry, and I had the advantage there of being able to go into that. But if I didn't have the numerous bailouts of well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Of having all these options available to me and having a deep, deep stack of highly skilled people and highly, not just from a sailing standpoint, from a boat building standpoint, from a design standpoint, from a theoretical standpoint, available to me throughout my entire childhood, I would have left too. So the UFO.
Fast forward to the UFO. You got to get me to the UFO.
The UFO attempts to leverage and successfully leverages the technology of the hydrofoil to pack a huge amount of access to the world of speed and specifically 3-axis sailing. So apparent wind, vertical elevation, pitch, roll, flight path. All the aspects of fully modern advanced sailing into something that you can actually have in your backyard on some random lake in some continent where people basically barely sail, and you have the world. So it's a question that the UFO was an attempt to basically create something that we can just turn a crank and make, and enables people who you don't have to know, you don't have to be coaching, you don't have to be assisting all the time. You basically free that person from requiring them to have a community of assistants and coaches and builders and things around them. That shouldn't be necessary. It should be the passion alone. The passion alone should be sufficient for someone to go all the way. And so the UFO is an attempt to build a base, and we've achieved that. It's been slow going at the start because we had to basically build a whole company around it, but we're still ripping along at 2 or 3 boats a week now, and it appears to be growing. Marcel has been doing great work. So the person that you met, touring the UFO, Siege is importing full container loads into Italy, and they're going to be building out a dealer network. So the access across Europe is going to be way higher. And the objective of that is volume, affordability, and most importantly, plurality. The thing for growing the sport of sailing, we're not there for growing the sport of foiling because all of us builders need to build another 48,000 boats.
Right. Well, I'm going to use that as an opportunity to move into the other boats, because here's the deal. When the UFO came out, there really wasn't anything like it. Setting up that kind of like a new community, a new culture, and educating people on, that this even exists was a big step. Now, the WASP came out not long after that.
Actually, the WASP predates the UFO.
It does. Okay, gotcha. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that maybe around the same time? I remember we had your prototype and the WASP was already there. So moving forward to Luka, a lot has changed since, in the last 4 or 5 years. And the WASP has been established. The UFO has been established as like a really awesome boat. And the FD switch, which I've been learning more about, I've been interviewing Olympic sailors who have been sailing it. And finally, the market has settled a little bit where the moth sailing people have, if you're going to decide it, you've already decided it. The WASP is an entry point, but there's this middle ground. So Luka, just me with the FD switch to have kind of like a relatively high-end production monohull foiler. What did you guys identify? Why is that model important?
Well, it is a result of learning from all the development that has happened in the sport and the foiling mod especially. So here we have with something simplified, that is a carbon fiber product, so it's light, but it tends to use affordable carbon fiber. So it plays a bit with the dimensions. It's outside of any rule, and so it ends up being very light, performing very fast, and hopefully being really truly one design because of top quality building, and it profits from all these experience. So the designers, Stefano and Gianfridi, they've done their apprenticeship. They've got their degree in Australia. They've worked in main companies there. They're not sailors themselves. I brought a bit of experience, like small details. The mast in the mod is an NJ4 is outrageously expensive. We just made it 4 millimeter wider. We use the 800. It's much cheaper, and at the end of the day, performs the same because the chord length of the sail is so big that being 38 or 42 millimeters makes no difference. And so the approach is to widen the range that you can use the boat, because that's a limiting factor in our analysis of all these kind of boats. The most important thing was to lower the range use, so a tiny bit more power from the sail, less drag because we are longer than the moth, so we have no gantry, the volume is distributed in a thinner hull, that ends up being lighter because you're not building the gantry and so on and so forth. And so,
earlier takeoff too.
Yeah, so it looks like it takes off at 5 knots. So then the next problem is, how do you make it sail in bigger waves? How do you make it sail in stronger winds? How do you safer there? And there, well, the America's Cup has helped so much. And I was lucky there that when I won plus 39 in the America's Cup in Valencia, I was the only one that used Harken hydraulics and not Cariboni. And Cariboni is a fantastic guy. He's providing all the AC teams now, and he's an old-style engineer, and he loves his job. And he never could work together because I chose Harken because Peter was my mate, and because he was cheaper and I had a team with no money. And so we went to him, and he fully jumped on board, and he saw the possibility of trying to do something. So we have a far advanced system that the mechatronics for Luna Rosa, and they did for the small boats. So we're trying to find sensors that are cheap and work. There's a problem there because the model's got about the model of these kind of boats, but 60 degrees of healing angle difference from one side to the other one. So when you have an ultrasonic sensor, it has to work.
Right.
How do you get it to give you the right data? But the processing is there, the algorithm is there, the sensor is there. And we're just delayed because in this crazy economical environment, we're not getting the actuators, the linear electric actuators, and Cariboni is the one of that. So that will be tested. It's not sure it gets implemented because the wand has been refined so much. It works actually very, very well, and it might be safer and simpler and so on and so forth. But we think of all the discussion has gone about having various mods on the algorithm. So like you have a chop, you just cut straight through. You got big ways, you contour the ways, and the mechatronics making it possible to sail in bigger sea states and possibly stronger winds. And so the dream is to be able to go from 5 to 25. Is it possible? I don't know. But certainly going down to 5 knots is very important because most places have always so much wind. So being able to take off is and then it's not dangerous, and so you can attract more people. So this is what we're working on.
Awesome. And we did an awesome tour of the boat, and we're learning that we're talking about things that have a place in the market and have people that can use the boat. And before I go any further, Riley Shute from US Sailing, I forgot to introduce you. And that's part of the kind of the end user and the analysis of the sailing community from the kind of a MNA, Member Nation Authority side of things. So sorry about that, Riley.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. And yeah, like I think Dave was saying, we're wanting to have the pathway involve more and more sailors, and from the individual passion level, but then also where we can provide, a bigger group through the Olympic development program or other things where people who want to go into Olympic equipment have a foiling, option. And now half of the classes in the next Olympics are going to be foiling. So where we can help, give opportunities for a more organized pathway to end up ultimately on the U.S. sailing team.
Awesome. And I'm going to come back to Riley when we start to talk about the big picture of pathways with people like Patty and Pearl and their experiences. I don't want to skip over Rowan Guide, because here's an important thing that I learned earlier today from some Olympic coaches, which is that, we were talking about recommendations to young sailors on their Olympic pathway foiling in the Olympics. And the answer, well, the first answer was ask a lot of questions from really awesome sailors. The second one was get out on any kind of foiling craft you can. And the core, the understanding of how hydrofoils work, the core work that it takes, the amount of balance that it takes. It's, the surfing skills are really good for foiling too, but all foiling skills are good for all boats. So Rowan, you and I talked really briefly about this. This seems like a non sequitur, but it's really about introduction to foiling. So we're going to have someone who's from the surf foiling, wing foiling world dropping in here in a second, Army Armstrong. But I think it's all part of a very similar community, which is what I love about this. So Rowan, just tell us briefly about the evolution of the Manta 5 and what kind of people that's bringing to the water.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think we're in an interesting time because I love the fact that the sailing industry, which I'm a part of since a long time, of Auckland and New Zealand, we're really in a unique position where I guess we're leading the front for the marine industry, right? In terms of sailing, we're taking influence from the America's Cup, as Luka mentioned, etc. But I think we need to keep in mind that this is just the beginning, right, in terms of application, because foiling for us is an amazing technology, which people need to remember has been around for decades. There's nothing brand new. We've been foiling crafts, I don't know, since what year, but the fact
50s.
the 50s, exactly. Apparently it's beginning from Italy in Milan. So that's what I've heard. So we'll need to look into the history a bit more. But the point I'm making here is that we have an amazing product ourselves. It's the first foiling bicycle in the world. We've created not only a new product, but a new sport. So the reason we're here at Foil Week is we might seem sort of a little bit left field, but I tell you what, we're taking inspiration from the classes, from regattas, how things are organized, because we see bicycling on the water as a new Olympic sport. And to do that, to get to this point, we need to obviously start from somewhere. So we're looking at existing models. We want to create communities. We want to create groups of 20, 30, 40 boats, as you guys do, Dave and Luka. You want to get boats into as many hands as possible. And we see the same for our sport. So we don't want to stop there, though. We want to inspire other industries, which I guess have to have some sort of aquatic application to see how they can apply foiling. That's the challenge we're putting out there. So we've seen great sailboats. We're seeing bicycles now. I want to ask the question, what's next? Because I'm excited to see about that. Look, we're seeing foiling already being developed in mass transportation. We could name a dozen companies across Europe and the world which are introducing them to ferries, other sorts of applications. So that's where we see the future. I'm really interested to see, because I've been in the marine industry for a number of years. And at the beginning, I thought, God, is this it? This is boring. It's always the same old farts at every old trade show, shaking hands, drinking a coffee, and then there's no advancing. But now we're in such a, I guess, unique period since the last sort of 5 to 6 years with this boom off the back of the America's Cup, where foiling is taking off. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, and our
industry has become cool.
and it doesn't happen obviously without the people behind it. In this particular case, the reason why we have Pearl and Hattie here is because, like you're saying, things have changed. It's really exciting. When I first saw the UFO in Newport, Rhode Island, a total game changer. And that boat was a game changer for a lot of people. The Wasp was a game changer for a lot of people. And so I want to talk to Pearl and Hattie about your your sailing careers. And I mentioned to the group earlier that, for most of us, we didn't have this exciting option that Rowan is talking about in any format, not in surf, not in bike, not in sailing single-handed boats like Luka's famous for. So tell me, was there a point in your sailing career where you were following a pretty traditional path with racing and clubs, and then it diverged into a new zone?
For sure. I think especially with me being at uni, like a lot of people stop sailing when they're at uni and do team racing or whatever, get jobs, have a family. So I think for me, I kind of finished my youth sailing, and it was like the only route really that I saw was either keelboat sailing or Olympic sailing. There wasn't really foiling. Foiling wasn't that big, I don't think, when I started uni. But so I did a year of Etra sailing. I did, which was really good. It was nice to step back from the dinghy sailing and just have a look at like what's available and what's around. And then I got into foiling 2.5 years ago, and it was just perfect because, I'd sailed a 29er before, and finding a crew that was kind of at the same stage as I was in like life and uni and everything was really tricky. So doing something completely different, fun, and then just enjoying my sailing really was foiling, and I just loved it ever since.
Awesome. And what was that first introduction?
Sorry?
What was that first introduction?
Oh, to foiling?
Yeah.
It was in the Wasp by Child, one of the child boats in the UK. And
so there was a program.
Yeah, completely. So there's a boat that you can use and go out in and see
Awesome.
how it kind of feels.
And since that point, where has that taken you?
I've sailed the Wasp for 2.5 years now. Absolutely loved it. And then through the Inspire stuff, so I won the event, the final in San Francisco.
That's from Sail GP Inspire?
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly. And then I did 2 days on the F50 with the Sail GP GBR team.
Awesome.
Which is cool. And it's just Wasp are doing a great job of introducing a lot of people into foiling, getting people and the opportunities are just right now. I just don't know why you wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I can't even imagine that having that opportunity, and then you grasped it. You took that opportunity and took it really far. And now you are in final stages of the Sustainable Moth Challenge with the University of Southampton, with the what we keep Luka pointing out, the wooden wing moth. Yeah, go ahead, Luka.
Yeah, this is something. So sailing captures the emotions of the people. And what is fantastic about this community, that it brings back what has been lost over the years. Yeah? So the enthusiasm, when you see our lovely colleague speaking, you see her eyes full of passion and she's into it. And the Sumot program is exceptional for that, because it's like a dream of a child coming through, creating something, putting your hands on it, getting into a new dimension. In this very difficult times post-COVID, we have an incredible opportunity of relaunching our sport. And it's very important that we stay free and unstructured and don't fall into this terrible Olympic structure where you have 3 races a day, 10 hours, physio, no social life, no friends, no party, no nothing. Because sailing is a social sport, and it's about dreaming. And this makes dream come true. And we have to be careful not to get captured again in the other model, because the other model kills us.
Yeah.
And this is what I find here so amazing in all the community, and all the people, that it has that spirit. When I was a young child, I was designing boats when I was at school. I had no books to go to school, and the teachers were really angry at me because I wasn't having anything. But I was designing my boats and then thinking and how to make it fast, how to make it better. This element of creativity is absolutely connected to the fascination of our sport. And this is here, absolutely fundamental. And that's the beauty of it.
And that's another option that's come out, an opportunity for you that's come out of this, which is a foiling competition for university. And now, Pearl, I know a little bit of your background. I saw you when you were really little in Bic Opens, and then the first foiling craft that you can get your hands on, which is probably a UFO and a Wasp. You and your brother have now taken that pretty far. I have the same question that I had for Hattie. You know, tell us about your kind of foiling voyage or journey, and where was it? Was there ever a point where foiling wasn't in the picture, and then all of a sudden it was something that was 100% your focus?
I think so. I started in the open Vic, like you said, and then I moved into RS Viva and 29er. So pretty much the standard pathway. So I think in around 2018, I think I got in a UFO for the first time with Dave Clark. So that was super cool to just get that first foiling experience and see what it's like to be on a foiling boat. And then a few months later, I was able to get on my friend's Wasp. He had bought one after trying getting for the first time, and that was the first Wasp in Hawaii. So we've now grown our fleet to like 13 or 14 boats on our island of Oahu, which is really, really cool for our fleet. We've got a lot of good training. It can be year round, and the conditions are just awesome there. So it's given us a lot of opportunity to travel and be pretty competitive and hopefully in the world. Yeah.
And you've been here in Lake Garda for the event, right? Tell me about that first time you were here. Did you feel like finally there are people just like you?
Oh, totally. It was so cool. I love the Wasp community. Everyone's just very welcoming. It's such a new class that everyone's learning together and just wants everyone to improve, so the class improves all together. Yeah, there aren't that many foilers, I think, in the US so far, but we're starting to grow it a lot, and go to Europe and see just like the level of foiling and what it can be like, and I'm sure it will be like probably very soon, is just really, really cool. And to meet people like Hattie and get to race all these like really cool foilers is just really fun.
Awesome. And I want to quickly introduce Armstrong, who got here finally.
Late, but better late than never. Just got off about a 45-hour travel mission, but it's good to be here.
Cool. And the order is coming in just for Army. Army's with a hydrofoil company that focuses mainly on board sports hydrofoils. I'm sure you do other things too, but the primary.
Yeah, well, I grew up sailing, so obviously I love the words about passion for sailing, and but now I'm right into the personal sort of board sport side of foiling. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just hearing a little bit about what you guys were saying with, like, for example, the SailGP Inspire program, and just the passion, for sailing and the sport. It's so awesome, to be involved in. And I think wing foiling and surf foiling and sort of foiling sports that we do will contribute to growing the whole foiling scene, whether it be sailing or anything, and especially SailGP with the Inspire program, obviously, that you were involved with. That's awesome, and that's going to really help bring new people to the sport. And we're getting a little bit involved with them up in the UK. We're doing a winging event, along with the SailGP. So that's another one in Europe. So yeah, stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and before we get to Kylie, maybe we'll pile on that. So Rowan here with Manta 5 foiling bicycles, bring you up to speed. And I guess the one question I had for you is, Dave Clark, had to get his head around, in 2015 beginning with how the UFO would work and the end user and what the experience has to be, and to keep it simple and all these manufacturing parameters. And then as everyone who's came after him, the Wasp being around the same time, had all the same challenges. My impression of Armstrong foils, which were early to market, like with GoFoil and a couple other brands, is that you designed your product to be super easy to use and not be crazy.
We try.
Okay.
It's evolving.
So I guess my question is, in foiling, everyone's doing something kind of new. So Dave had to figure out the type of foils, that he needed to use to be appropriate. AMAC from Wasp had to do the same. Rowan had to do the same. Luka had to make his decisions. In the early days of your company, were you thinking that because everyone here now has wing foiled and all the Olympians talk about it when they're not talking about sailing, because I can hear them talking about it. Did you consider the end user and their experience and how you want to build their experience at their career when you started the company, or were you just like, I just need to get any foil out that works?
Well, partly it was just get something out there that works,
Yeah.
but we definitely really had a focus to try and grow the market with quality gear, or grow the audience, with quality gear, so that people would love doing it and want to come back and do it. So we made our foils really big, really fat, and really slow. And there's two double-edged swords to that one.
Does that mean you could have made them thinner and faster and harder?
Yeah.
Okay.
But, well, actually, the first foils I made very thin and fast, and I tried to, race Kalini and Hawaii on them and failed miserably because the foils were better than me.
Right.
So I was like, okay, now let's make it easy. And that was my little personal journey with foiling, was trying to, beat the kids in that little surf foil sort of downwinding world. And then we got them, and actually, it's so fun. Let's try and make it easy. And so our goal was to try and make it as accessible. And then winging came along, which didn't exist, in our little world initially. And it's really made, I think, foiling probably the most accessible from wind sport, definitely. And then from there, I think people are going to progress into moths and wasps and who knows what. And I think it's going to be good for sailing generally, which is awesome.
Yeah, and that brings in Riley. Riley, I pronounce your last name for, is it Shoot or?
Shut. Yep.
Shut, like door. Awesome. Riley, so with U.S. Sailing, you're a representative of one of World Sailing's MNAs, member nation authorities. And so we're listening to everyone talk here. We've talked a lot about the UFO because it is the OG for like beach sport foiling, and the WASP because it is the OG for competitive production foilers. Where do all these products, and now with wing foiling, because now you're U.S. Sailing, so wing foiling, you can actually claim it. And even with cycle flooring foiling, you can actually use it as cross training. So where do all these things, and then also the more performance production boat like the FD Switch, where do they fit in with member nation authorities' vision of how they, present the sport of sailing to newcomers?
Yeah,
And
so I think in my role, I'm pretty focused on the U.S. sailing team and how we can use technology there to do better on an international competition level. But I think a really big part of that is growing our, the base of people in the United States that are using foiling boats to, get a big group of people who are interested in it, so that eventually we have, those that choose the Olympic pathway have a lot of foiling experience. So I think having all of these different options that get people on the water foiling, gets us more people at the end who want to pursue an Olympic campaign. And yeah, I think that it also attracts a really, sometimes a different set of people who find foiling a lot more accessible than finding a yacht club and going through, a dinghy and keelboat program, which is great for people involved.
Yeah, and I have a question for Hattie and Paul, which is that, I think organizations like US Sailing, all the other federations, the equipment has developed a lot faster than organizations can move, right? To adapt their pathways, their programs, their training to these, even as far as race management is concerned. My question for Pearl and Hattie, with that in mind, that you're involved in foiling craft and in cases racing foiling craft, do you ever feel the obligation or the urge to speak up with either your clubs or your coaches or even the class associations, in this case the WASP class association, to say, hey, I wish we would either change the format or have different types of regattas in different places or anything like that? Do you feel empowered because you've been sailing the boats at more in your time in your life than the inventors have?
Well, I think that especially the WASP class, I don't know about any of the others, but definitely quite open, and they do listen, especially to, I'm part of the UK committee, so I represent the girls, and I think everything gets fed back to the UK rep to WASP, and then they improve the boat. It could be technical, it could be how things are run. And I think especially in the WASP class, so it's really cool, different racing formats. So we have a slalom championships and then a fleet racing champs as well. They're quite different. They're completely separate. So you actually have 2 champions at the end of the week.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's inclusive.
Yeah.
It makes everyone feel they're going for something attainable.
It's just so cool. I mean, within the WASP class, we've got our games actually here in Chesney in 2 weeks. And we've got 170 boats coming.
Wow, that's impressive. That's cool.
It's growing.
And Pearl, for you, you're not in Europe all the time. You're mostly North America and the Pacific Islands. And so how do you feel about influencing the culture of foiling from a young sailor's perspective? You're early and people have focused on you because you've been one of the only foilers in your communities. But have you spoken up and made suggestions in terms of how things should be run or, modify the culture of the sport?
Totally. That since I'm young, I offer a new perspective, and so in the WASP USA class, they're ready to listen and they want to hear what the young generation has to say. So now I'm on the US WASP board, and we're looking how we can increase foiling in the US, how we can keep people in sailing just overall, and new location foiling. So we've been discussing a lot about I know people want to have an America's Championship and then hopefully the World Championship on WASP in Hawaii. So we've been looking at the logistics of that, and they're very open to suggestions and what we think would be best. And then also we're looking at possibly figuring out some sort of way to get community of WASPs or club boats into communities so that they have a chance to at least get on a boat and just experience it. In Hawaii, we have two club WASPs, which has really, I think, been a huge factor in our growth. And if we can expand that across the US, it would be really cool.
Pearl, what's your end goal? What's the limit? Where do you guys want to be in a couple of years?
I don't know our goal quite. We did have 33 people at the America's Championship in March. So that was a pretty good size fleet for the US. I don't know. I'd like to see if we have an America's Championship in Hawaii in 2023, which is our goal. I think we're aiming for 60 boats.
Cool. Awesome. What I want to do is I have to shift the conversation just to make sure we hit all of our points. And this is an interesting one. We have some really great minds here and some innovators. I'm going to start this one with Dave and over on and we have to keep it a little short because everyone has to think up this answer, which you may have already thought about. The boats like the ones we're talking about and the equipment like we're talking about is, like Dave even said, the UFO is not a static object because they do all their manufacturing and R&D right there in Bristol, Rhode Island. They can make some fine-tuned changes to improve their product. They can't just stick with what they did and not improve. And everyone's kind of tries to do that. Going forward, looking at the experiences of Hattie and Pearl that had these opportunities that we didn't have, that most of their adult life, all their adult life, they're foilers. And here it's such a blip on our radar screen, but it's going to be the rest of our life. Each one of you, and I'll start with Dave, from what you know now, and I know you don't want to always creating product, but is there kind of a little spark of something as I watch these boats sailing around Lake Garda of what entry level, where we can gain on the entry level foiler, something like the original. I know you just everyone's product kind of did that, but from what we know now, what can we do better?
Well, yeah, okay, so I'll be a little bit snotty about this. More UFOs.
I think I just said don't talk about your own.
I want to correct something because we're seeing in the course of this, just briefly want to correct something. You're accidentally rewriting history here. The WASP does predate the UFO, and the WASP was
I keep messing that up
when we were going to production.
Okay,
The
good.
difference maker is that if you look at use cases and user groups and the expansion of the sport, the WASP, Andrew McDougall's a great engineer and a great businessman. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know him almost exclusively at Foiling Week, actually. Thank you, Foiling Week. It was a really solid one design execution of moth technology and has reaped the rewards therein. Luka will probably do that at the higher dollar level with the Manta 5 because it's probably a decent time to one design.
The FD switch.
That's right, FD switch.
Yeah.
The FD switch, just because it's probably a decent time to try solidifying that again. Blade Rider tried it, but Blade Rider was having some massive issues at the time, partially due to no longer having Andrew on staff. When you take Andrew out of Blade Rider stops existing. The lead engineer is the guy who's making it work. Anyway, with the UFO,
Green Boat.
So this is where I'm getting to from the historical point.
Okay.
It has been hard work to actively not push the known use case for sailing, but that's precisely what we've been doing with the UFO. For about one season, I got sucked into doing regattas, and I regretted it instantly. Because regattas, at least in North America, where we are subcritical mass, is absolutely the wrong thing to be doing. So the UFO, the thing that's funny is like, if we were trying to push people to go to regattas, we'd have like 100 boats on the line in North America, but that's not the point.
Right. And we're all talking about entry level here too for this part of the equation.
So for the sport for water sports to grow in general, for sail drive or wave drive or surf water sports to grow. This is true as surfing and also frozen water sports, snowboarding. Sailing in its original expansion in the 1930s and 40s and 50s with the sailfish and the sunfish are the first production dinghies that were actually of any size, at least on our continent. It is driven by users exclusively, and it is only once we start to govern it that it starts to decline. So we've actively tried to avoid trying to tell people what to do with their boats and instead listen and try to learn from them. And so with the UFO, it's led to a couple of things that have come to mind. Basically, among other things, all of our foilers are physically too deep. There's a lot of water that is not 3 feet or 4 feet deep. There's a hell of a lot of wind and water now. The kite foiling, the kite surfing, all those guys have basically, and the windsurf community and wind foiling have known that for ages and have been leveraging that for ages. But in general, you're asking us about design, so that's
I'm asking about the dream little starter boat.
Waiting to comment on because it's a question of respect and saving bandwidth and saving time for various people to talk. And is this a 2-hour one or is this 1 hour?
We've got 10 minutes.
Oh shit. Okay. From a design standpoint, we must continue to push stability, ease of use, while not compromising performance, which has been the core priority and it's been the goal that we pretty much achieved with the UFO. Now, the question is whether or not you need to, and the same thing actually with the WASP as well, that you attempted to not compromise that much moth level performance and achieve some relative increases in stability. Though, as with all things that stand on top of a strut, changing the amount of whiplash in the strut versus the foil versus the trunk connections does increase instability sometimes. But there have also been quad foilers that have been put on the market that have largely not taken the world by storm because they're too stable and are actually slower than a lot of catamarans out there. Now, not all quad foilers, and I don't have all the data, but
or the trifoiler.
The important thing is to connect the sailor, connect the user to the extremely vibrant and mind-expanding world of 3-axis sailing or riding or anything, because that fundamentally improves your experience as a human being and makes you a happier person. Solving that really today fundamentally makes you better.
I'm gonna use your comment as a design brief.
I'll jam one last thing in here. Marcella, the importer who's running the UFO stand out there, everybody go have a look. They have UFOs in inventory, but very few left. So you want to get them before the next container load has to be waiting to come. She just sold 2 UFOs to a sailing school for the blind.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we
It's fun.
and by the way, to comment on that too, new accessible foiling craft. We have an ongoing design competition and challenge about. We play carefully with the term disabled sailors, but for Paralympic type sailors, but not racing, just training and beginning sailing with Guillaume Verdier. So that goes right into the design brief that David mentioned, which is just this connection and what you were talking about with passion, Luka. So let's boil this down really quick. Is there something that doesn't exist now, or let's just come up with some parameters of like the perfect thing with the technology we know.
We need a boat for kids.
For kids.
We need a boat for kids. Our sport is like in a transition time. It's a bit schizophrenic. You got the America's Cup. You got this. You got that. It's all sexy, and the kids got it and Oppie.
Yeah.
And that's where where the problem lies. Well, the Oppie is nice. It's magic. It's got something very good. It's safe.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose your kid at sea. You don't want to have 20,000 coaches.
Right.
So here it's the boat for kids, a boat that is fun, but is seaworthy, a boat that you can take your sail down and get a tow in when the kid is crying, and a boat that hooks him in for life. And then everything will follow from there. And we try to stay away from this format with too many coaches, too many parents, and only winning. Right. It's about having fun, and that's whoever cracks that will change the name of the game for the entire community, and I hope somebody will do it soon. I got my ideas. I got even a magic name for it. But we'll see if I'll make it. But I have to say, I did talk to one of the elite designers, to one Kuyumjan, about my debrief, and if he was captured, he's going to do a drawing. So let's see. But I'm sure that this is what can change our sport.
Awesome. And I'll move over to Army. One thing I learned how to foil, with certain equipment first, and I moved over to Armstrong, and that's where our connection came in. And it was awesome to have equipment to follow my progression, to make my progression easier. But something like board sports hydrofoiling is different. It's hard. Just like moth sailing is hard versus sit down sailing. So for the future, it seems like there is certain level of entry. Although we have sit down Paralympic people using your foils too. What's the future look like?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've gone single vertical, which is a big difference to the sailing, which does add an element of skill with just balancing pitch. But we're getting much more stability out of just changing geometries and, adding probably third wings and stuff like that, for really making it easy is going to happen. But I guess just feeding into that whole thing about it, what's going to grow the sport is it being fun. Exactly like the racing's great as an avenue for people that want to go there, but all of these sports, it's about being out in the elements and enjoying the energy of nature, And so I think personally, coming back to that, wing foiling actually already is going to be the biggest entry level for sailing on the planet. I'm putting it here right now.
Cool. And let's move over to Rowan. Rowan, cost. We've talked about cost. The entry point for the Manta 5, getting on the water with hydrofoils in any way, shape, or form. I can really imagine people having access to a hydrofoil bike, seeing the other forms of hydrofoiling, and all this cross-pollination that we see on the water is a big deal. For you, Manta 5 is just in the beginning stages of the product. In the future, for getting people on the water, and hydrofoils just happens to be your way of doing that. What's going on to make things even easier?
Yeah, I think it's important to state that our current bike, which you see here on the lake, is first generation, right? So we've commercialized the product design and put it together out of New Zealand, and now we're manufacturing in Asia and distributing to 50 countries worldwide. So that's a great step. However, we are taking, like I said earlier, influence from the sailing industry in terms of development, etc., because we want to open up foiling, getting out in the water, enjoying nature to the biggest audience that is possible. So not only are we crossing over sailing, we're crossing over cycling, we're crossing over into well-being, we're crossing over into all sorts of industries which are allowing them to access foiling and actually experience the stuff that we're talking about, right? because we're saying how sensational being out in water is, flying above water, it's feeling of liberty. But you can't really understand it until you try it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to do that and make that accessible with our bike. But obviously having a lower price point as well is super important for us to make it accessible. And, you know, we need to have other business models which allow people to not necessarily buy the product. So we need to be conscious, you know, whether that's renting, leasing or whatever. So I think as a manufacturer, we should have this in mind as well. My dream concept, to go back to your earlier concept, is, you know, I'm a passionate Aucklander and sailor as well. And we've had proof of concept in Bermuda with the AC50s, cycling and sailing combined, right? So I want to see that on an industrial scale. I would like to see whoever it might be. Maybe we need a Team New Zealand collaboration.
I did not see this coming, by the way. The connection.
To be honest, either did I. It's there. It's been proved. If somebody can come up with a you know, a factory product which combines our two sports, and really keeping in mind that, you know, accessibility, whether it's someone has a handicap or might not be able to normally get out in the water on sitting a moth or a wasp. Just think big. Think everybody, kids, middle-aged, elderly. Bring out the cats and dogs if they want, you know? I think that's what
mountain, road, or cyclocross. Mountain swells would be epic. Cyclocross, if you have to portage, would be really good too. Road,
oh my God,
pretty good for wheels, but mountain and cyclocross would be epic.
All right, Rowan just kind of blew our minds with this whole thing. Now I'm thinking like auxiliary dinghies. So like when the wind goes away, you just break out the pedal and okay. So I'm going to rein this back in, but thank you for that. And Dave, thanks for bringing. Now I'm thinking like Army's like, wait a second, riding upwind on my foils.
Well, I don't, is anybody
thought about that?
Definitely has. Ocean swells are really fun to foil on.
Yeah, but up. Anyway, okay. I'm gonna bring this back in. I want to give Harry and Pearl the last word here because I think in a lot of ways, like what Luka was saying, he's looking on what the sport was. Dave's looking at the way the sport is in the United States. Army has to look forward all the time, and so does Rowan. But we have two athletes and awesome humans and students here who have a different perspective than we have. So I'll start with Pearl and then end with Hattie. Pearl, you know, for yourself, foiling is just a huge part of your life. It's a huge part of my life. I'm 47 years old and I've only been doing it for barely 2 years. And it's the biggest part of my life for my personal well-being. My family knows this. We had in the Foiling Film Festival, there was a guy our age that's basically saved his life from Australia. So I can't imagine what it's like to be in your early 20s and have this as an influence. Very briefly, what are you looking forward to in the future for yourself? What's the plan?
I'm gonna keep foiling. I've been just trying to get on as many foiling boats as I can, and I think that's hopefully still my future. I'm on the Wasp, 6 Armstrong foils in the surf and wing, and getting as much experience hopefully you Sarah as well, and then also Moth. Yeah, just staying with it and see where it takes me.
Awesome. And Hattie, you're doing awesome in your design challenge with the Sumoth. You're racing a lot. You're succeeding in that. You're having a really good time. What's the next couple of years hold? What's your big goal right now, and how does foiling work into that?
Well, I mean, I've just come out of uni.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. So I'm going to be graduating this summer, like most of my team as well. And so I think that's quite interesting with the perspective that just coming out of kind of an engineering degree and seeing foiling from that kind of view as well. But I want to do the America's Cup for sure. That's the goal. I really want to win it for Great Britain.
Nice.
Yeah. Right, good luck. Not too much good luck.
We've got 2 New Zealanders and someone from the UK. Oh, we have every America's Cup team here. So we'll have an arm wrestling match after this. But we're going to have to close on that. That's fantastic. All of you. And so thank you, Riley. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Pearl. Thank you, Luka, Army, Rowan, Hattie next to me. Foiling Week 2022. We are almost done with these for today, and we have a couple more sessions tomorrow in the Foiling Week Forum. I think Luka has one more thing to say.
Thank you, Chris.
All right.
Thanks,
Ciao.
Good to be there in person.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. Well, next year's the 10th anniversary, and we will not accept no for an answer.
Count
So
on us.
thanks,
It's so
everyone.
beautiful out there. The wind just kicked in. It's looking good.
I know, he's
Lots of sailing around.
He's going to make you guys feel bad. So awesome, everyone. We'll see you at the next session.